Hi everybody, this is Anthony Caponiti from #Sports, coming to you live. It's 5 p.m. Eastern. Thanks again for joining us. It's certainly been a fun-filled, fact-filled, relentless 2 days of knowledge sharing and thought leadership with #SportsConf. Been honored to have amazing speakers, amazing thought leaders, talking about how technology and digital media is changing the sports industry, and that's a fact. Appreciate everybody who's been participating with the #SportsConf on social media, sharing information. It's been great. You know, we can't do this without our community. So without further ado, just kind of want to dive in since we're a few minutes behind. Do some quick introductions. I have Nancy Bennett, who's the Chief Content Officer at 2-Bit Circus. Hi, Nancy.
How you doing? Glad to be here.
Thank you. And also have Mary Spio from Next Galaxy. She's the president and founder. And then we have Reilly, who's the CEO and co-founder of Down Sports VR.
Hey guys.
So let's kind of dig into it. Actually, we do Brandon and Mary, while we're chatting, can you just go on mute, and then when you talk, take the mute off, and get a little bit of feedback. Okay. So just kind of digging into it, I think the main thing here is virtual reality is a technology with game-changing potential, obviously. And for people tuning in today, we have some technologists, we have developers, we also have people that aren't really familiar with the technology at all. So, you know, our conversation is really going to focus not getting down to the granular nitty-gritty, the technical, obviously, but really examining what this technology represents, and it's big time, obviously. But, you know, when you think about virtual reality, or maybe a lot of people don't know this, has been around for decades. First question that comes to mind for me is, what factors specifically in the past 2 to 3 years has been the catalyst that's really, you know, caused such rapid development in the virtual reality space? Obviously, a lot of people are familiar now with the name Oculus Rift, but how did this all come to be? Why is it happening so fast, and how did we get to today? Brandon, can you kind of dive in for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, having seen it just in our own little world of Neon Sports, having seen it, we thought 2 years ago we were going to develop out these big simulation size rooms like cave or what we call it Eon iCube environments. We thought that that's what we were going to use, and they're, you know, they're really cost intensive. And I think, you know, when you talk about smartphones or whether you talk about Oculus or anything, it's just Moore's law. It's the fact that the processors, the graphics cards, all of this stuff is progressing at a rate that we can now provide extremely powerful experiences on something as simple as your smartphone. To even think of doing this 2 years ago was like a dream. It was something we all talked about, but we never really had the even wherewithal to make come to life. So now I'd say the mobility, the interconnectivity of different networks, being able to pipe in data, and then just Moore's law, things move, and they move fast on the hardware side. So as software guys, we used to say we're kind of at the beginning of the wave and like, come on, catch up to us. And now it's really exciting because now it's here.
Nancy, you want to touch on that and build on it a little bit?
Yeah, I think the increased computer processing speed makes the biggest difference, and it allows for multi-user experiences, but also an experience that doesn't make you sick to your stomach. And certainly immersion is the new engagement, because the more peripheral experience you have of an event, a live event, a movie, the more in the game, in the event you are. And our devices are getting bigger and bigger. The quality is getting better and better. And now with the virtual reality world and the processor speed, we can have that wraparound experience that also taps into our physiology and allows us to experience things on an emotional, biological almost level. So the time is now. It's a perfect storm.
And so on that note, just kind of getting a little more deeper into it, we kind of touched on this with the emotional, but Mary, what are some of the ways that virtual reality, specifically as it relates to entertainment and sports, can get fans closer to the game, and then ultimately, why is it that would be more valuable, specifically to teams, leagues, or sponsors? Obviously, they want to get fans more integrated, but what specifically about virtual reality? It's on, Steve. I did. Yeah, well, Nancy, can you take this real quick, and then I'll get. There we go, Mary. You're back.
Right. I was saying that, I think that there are a few reasons. One, sports is such a social, it's such a social thing that to be able to get fans from across the globe enjoy the game all together, that's such a win-win for both the fans as well as for the teams. And then also, I think that everything that we've been seeing with TV has kind of been like, looking at everything through a straw. So now imagine for the fan, you can actually, be at the game without being at the game. So it just opens up, the whole field of view for the fan, and it just makes for a better experience.
Brendan, you wanna touch on that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. I think when you talk about the fan experience, we attack things a lot from a training perspective. But when you talk about the fan experience, I think what it really allows brands, if we think of sports teams as brands, it allows them to connect with them beyond just the live event itself. And kind of to Mary's point, like being able to go home. Like you'll never replace the being there, the joy of going to your favorite football team stadium on game day, but to be able to extend that experience and kind of keep that experience growing, and for the teams themselves being able to connect directly to them, directly to the end user, I think that offers a lot of opportunities with respect to fan experience, user engagement. And we're starting to see, I know Mary does a lot in the kind of fan engagement area, and we're starting to see that really take off and boom. And I think just as we were talking about, as the processing, Moore's Law, and all that, is starting to really take hold, and the networks become stronger, and the infrastructure within these environments becomes better, the at-home experience becomes that much more powerful. So I don't think we're ever going to replace the value of going to the stadium arena, but I think we can extend that experience even further.
I wouldn't mind jumping in on that a little bit more, which is speaking to Facebook's emergence in this space with the acquisition of Oculus, which brought it to the main stage in a big way. Facebook is a social experience, and when we have virtual presence with one another, that social experience is going to be very exciting, and that's the reason why Facebook is interested. That's why any big brand would be interested, because it allows magnification of the conversation globally. And for the live event, which is the one thing that sports does better than any other kind of entertainment, we can't always be there. We can't always afford it. We can't always afford to get there. And our closest injection point is the television right now. But to be there in the presence, in the iconic hall where the sports act takes place, watching across the court, front and center, or from the point of view of the player, LeBron James doing an acrobatic move into a dunk, is phenomenal. And certainly with the reach to Asia, with the NBA having a pretty huge digital presence there, that opportunity is even more exciting because there's a huge fan base that can now feel the iconic hall of Madison Square Garden, or go see the Cavaliers live, or come and see the Lakers and the Clippers and find a variety of fan experiences that are really, truly engaging because they are immersive in a truly immersive way. And I also think with the social connectivity that brands like Facebook are, I'm sure, going to take advantage of, and the interactivity that technologists like Two-Bit Circus people, like other people around the globe right now, will facilitate, will allow that experience to be a water cooler event like never before. People will be talking about the game while it's happening, looking at it, turning around, seeing each other react, and it's contagious.
Well, you know, and Brendan, it is going to be contagious. And I think Brendan mentioned this a bit, kind of building off that. But in terms of connectivity in venue and wireless and the specs that go along with, you know, crystal clear virtual reality and the way we want it to run, is that an issue right now? How long is it going to take to get up to speed? And ultimately, is that a barrier to entry, you know, for widespread adoption? I mean, what are the things kind of standing in our way?
Certainly, there's a lot of question about connectivity and making that experience uninterruptible. And I think that's about the leagues and the players buying into that kind of access and intimacy as well, and the infrastructure being put in place. But you see big brands beyond Facebook, all of the mobile phone providers looking to use their relationships in supporting their leagues and their events and sports with infrastructure in the stadiums. And so the next barrier, and these things progress kind of parallel, you know, the consumer barrier is being addressed by people like Samsung with a really ubiquitous consumer opportunity to use your phone in a very high-end experience, in spite of it being 1080p, and we all want to be at, you know, 8,000 pixels instead of the current requirement of, you know, we see them pushing the inroads. Everybody's pushing the inroads to make it happen, and I think it's going to be very quick. And certainly the projections are saying that Facebook will have an Oculus Rift for the public sometime at the end of 2015, and that's a huge game changer. So everyone is rushing to reach that audience that Facebook has, that Google already has by search, that I'm sure Apple will jump in, and everyone else. And there's a platform play by PS4 too, with Sony. So there are heads-mounted display units out there. Everybody's developing them. Everybody's developing tech, and it's going to happen very quickly and make it very accessible. It's the cost that needs to come down for the consumer. And so when leagues and players make those deals on that content and how the rights are to be distributed, they have to help all the people who are helping them to reach fans in a new way, and to help the community that's going to help them make excellent content by keeping those costs reasonable for the consumer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, speaking about the infrastructure, even with our C platform, we've been doing a lot of testing in terms of live streaming. The live streaming quality is not where it needs to be, but in terms of on-demand, whether it's on things like the Note 4 or, you know, using cardboard, I think that the quality that we're able to achieve, and then also the infrastructure, a lot of what we're doing is really just a new way of delivering video, right? So yes, we do have to worry about how we render the environment itself in addition to rendering off the content. But there's just so much that, you know, we've seen just over the last few months in terms of cloud rendering software and other types of applications that are enabling our ability to be able to deliver very high quality content inside of a dynamic environment. So, you know, you can enjoy that magic, as Nancy said, of being in Madison Square Garden or being elsewhere. So all of those advances are happening very quickly, and I believe that, you know, by the time, you know, the Oculus is released, or by the time we're further down the line, everybody's kind of going to meet each other, where the teams are going to be open to, you know, licensing this content, right, for content providers to be able to deliver it. But now there is still a lot of politics in terms of, you know, some of the past licenses that have been done, right? Is this considered digital, or is this a new, you know, category? Where do you really place it? And I think some of those conversations have to be concluded in order for VR content to be developed, you know, entirely for sports as well.
Very true. Anthony, can't hear you.
Sorry about that. There we go. I was saying, Brendan, I wanted to come to you, and I was actually apologize for my Brandon Bush because I called you Brandon about 3 times. So there we go.
I've been called worse.
That's good. That's good. At least I'm not the bottom of the list. There we go. But focusing specifically on Eon, I know that you're looking to use virtual reality to enhance specifically athlete-player performance, and then also looking at player safety, which is a huge issue in contact sports like football, obviously. Can just tell everybody a little bit more about what you're doing in that space and what the biggest benefits of VR is to specifically, especially I would guess, like youth and collegiate sports as it relates to safety.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we approached it, we're actually a bunch of former coaches, and it really very simplistically, we kind of went to the drawing board and we thought we were going to create, like, at the time, to do virtual reality on your smartphone was so out of this world. But things like the Oculus didn't even exist then. But we thought that we were going to create something like Luminosity for brain training for athletes. We wanted to help guys make better plays and make the right plays on the field. And then what we realized was at the end of the day, the human mind has evolved to learn best by doing. And whether you're a surgeon or whether you're a fighter pilot, being able to train in the simulated environment that you're going to actually experience, well, that makes sense. Well, when you translate that to sports, it's kind of 2 things. It's you touched on it. The injury prevention, concussions is a big thing, and just realistically, you can't be on the field for 10 hours a day. So the only way to get better is to we know how to make the athletes big, fast, and strong. But then how do we know when we put them on the field, how do we know they're going to see that linebacker coming and make the right play? So what we designed is a suite of software that allows coaches to put their athletes in game-like scenarios at game speeds, so when they step on the field, they've been there and they've done that, and they will make the right play. So, we didn't intentionally really focus on the injury, but because it's such a big issue, we have a lot of parents, a lot of coaches, and a lot of administrators coming to us and saying, we have to find a better way to teach and train our kids. The old way of just hit them harder and becoming a better football player in that capacity, that doesn't fly anymore. And
Right.
Coaches are kind of left with at the end of the day being like, do we want to be Netflix or do we want to be Blockbuster? So we're seeing that no one, I always say no one innovates for the sake of innovating. You innovate to make something that you're doing currently better. And so with coaches, it's not like that they sat around and they said, when they started lifting weights, they weren't like, oh, we can't wait to get up in the summer every day at 5 a.m. and lift with our kids. They realized that if they weren't doing that, they were going to get their butts beat by the teams that were lifting weights. So we're at that kind of shift right now of, okay, athletic associations are shrinking the amount of time we can spend with the kids through safety rules and everything like that. So how do what worked for us the past 20 years doesn't work anymore. So how do we get our kids the same amount of repetitions, build them up mentally, and help them, train that part of their game so they're a more complete player? And they've actually surprised me with their desire to utilize this type of technology. When the kids see it, we're all here because it's virtual reality. They love it, yeah. But when it's actually a coach implementing it into his program, it takes, you kind of have to prove that it's going to help the kids, and we've done that through some research studies, and then you have to, prove the validation of, okay, this is how you utilize it throughout, your training process.
That's very cool. And, Mary, it's kind of speaking on what Brandon said too. I mean, you need early adopters, you need evangelizers, people that have a lot of visibility in the public that are adopting technology, especially when it's a fundamental shift. And I know in talking prior to this, we spoke a little bit about the work you've done with Coach Boeheim at Syracuse and other college coaches. Can you talk a little bit more about the work you've done with NCAA basketball coaches in the college arena?
Sure, and we're currently working with a few coaches in that arena, with Coach Boeheim. And a big part of looking at, the VR experience is for sports conditioning, as Brendan said, it not only allows people to be able to practice, without having to, but it also gives a much wider field of view, right, for the coaches. So even as they're doing recruiting, if you can actually see a 360 view of the game versus a limited view, again, that goes back to them feeling like, well, rather than looking through a straw, now I can look at the entire game. I can see how the athlete is actually interacting on the court, and you just get, the more data you get, the more you're able to analyze and make better decisions. And so for coaches, they're just coming from a few angles, one being a better recruiting tool, better conditioning tool, and just overall being able to see more of the game, and that's great, and making a difference between that win and not winning.
Yeah, and I mean, I know clearly, again, speaking of both those points, there are coaches, when it comes to the performance side of virtual reality, safety and enhancing performance, that have been early adopters. I know that Chip Kelly at Oregon was, very early adopter technology, and that was part of the kind of what he ingrained into the culture when he was at Oregon, and now is brought to the Philadelphia Eagles. So clearly, that's what it takes to affect the change, and teams tend to mimic one another when they see something that's working. So the more that happens, the quicker it kind of adopts on the performance side. And speaking about professional leagues, Nancy, I know that recently the NBA made a big splash. We had articles in #SportsDaily about this, with their use of 360-degree video on Samsung's Milk VR, and that was with the help of 2-bit Circus. But virtual reality doesn't physically take you to an event, but it mentally brings you there. What specifically of what the NBA was doing, what kind of TV implications does that have?
I think the TV implications are huge. I think we've hit on some of the reasons why the NBA and any other league or any other entertainment destination would want to jump on the bandwagon of VR, and that is because it is a very immersive, socially engaging experience, ultimately, and allows you such an intimate exploration of anyone's discipline or point of view, and as the series was called for the NBA, keys to the game. Big footnote here. I am not a sports professional. I am a content maker who happens to be very experienced in making sports content, and 2-bit Circus as a company, we focus on making immersive, entertaining experiences using tech. It is often isolating, but we focus on bringing people together through social interaction and engagement with technology, whether physically or virtually. So 2-bit Circus came into the sports space because there were considerable technical challenges, and we were asked to solve them. And so going at 170 miles per hour in a race car, or running as a punt returner down a huge field, it's all very similar high-tech workarounds to get motion stabilization, to get that first-person point of view, to feel the pulse racing. And one of the things that there are two ways that we really differentiate with what we're doing with VR, aside from being super geeks who are engineers and coders, programmers, and roboticists. We capture telemetry, and we implement motion platforms wherever we can for physical installation so that you can feel what it likes to be in that first-person position. That also helps to offset the often motion disorientation that some people feel in VR. And we create haptic vests and suits and foot platforms that create those vibrations and recreate the environment from which we captured. And so, in terms of making it a ubiquitous experience for the NBA or for anyone else, the challenge is to work around the motion and the traction in the field without interrupting the athlete and the mechanism that the athlete uses to make things happen. But what was really interesting for me was by dropping in like a parachutist right into the middle of the eyes of Marcus Smart or J.J. Redick or Kelly Olynyk, I learned more about basketball than I ever thought I would learn. And I learned about the profound strategic automaton-like reflexes these guys have. They're constantly plotting where they are. Basketball is phenomenal, and I think football is too. And I like to watch it on TV because it's as intimate as I've seen it yet. But I'm anxious to get on that field and see it from the helmet, as we've captured before. And the reason being that it allows me an even more layered and dimensional experience in the event, in the sports, and what the athlete is doing. So I'm interested in what these players do and how they perfect their skills. Like watching J.J. Redick go around the world and lob 20 shots in a row right center through the swooshing rope is just mind-blowing. And to be that, you know, to talk to him about it and understand that it's about practice. It's the same kind of classical pedagogy that we all take seriously in our own sort of, you know, cylindrical disciplines. I mean, you know, practicing movie making is about practice and thinking through a shot. So you want to get inside the mind of somebody when you're thinking about doing that. And of course you want to do it now with the whole world in view. So what is it that they do? How are they moving with each other? How are they working as teammates? What are they saying to each other on the field? We can capture all of that now. And before, you had huge dish microphones that were pointing at these guys on the field, and you're trying to like listen in, or you want to hear what the coach is saying. I think it's going to really put a spotlight on the players, the league, the coaches, the managers to, you know, pull the veil. and it'll be great for them. It'll be hard for everybody because it's very intimate, but also it'll just expand our minds as to what really goes on to bring a discipline like that to athletic prowess. And it's pretty spectacular stuff. So I think immersion is pretty damn good in terms of competing with television, especially with the speed at which it's accelerating to the hands of consumers. And I also think it's an added revenue stream for all of the leagues and all of the entertaining people in the world. It's, you know, if you think about television ratings and how many people tune in to whatever, what do we have? A third of the country watched the Super Bowl, maybe 2/3 of the country. It still wasn't the whole country. It's quite possible that we can up the participation in media events when it's a socially engaging virtual experience. I think it'll up the ante quite a bit. So hopefully I answered your question. And
you did. No, you did.
Some other things. Yeah.
No, you did. You did. You know, a couple things for me that come to mind, you know, as we talk about it. And again, there's so many different use cases for virtual reality. I mean, we're tip of the iceberg. We talked about performance and safety, and then you know, there's consumer facing and even other obviously areas we haven't touched on. But one is the technology itself being seamless versus bulky, the user experience, and another with newer technology that doesn't have mass adoption is cost. So I mean, Mary, with the technology right now, I mean, I would assume a lot of people listening and watching, they really don't know very much about, you know, virtual reality, and they might even be interested, but the first instinct would be, well, I can't afford it, especially something that's consumer-facing. Is cost prohibitive right now? I mean, what does it take to create these consumer experiences, especially on the consumer side that, you know, we've been talking about?
You know, I think that there's a lot out there for people to at least test the waters, right? The Google Cardboard, you know, we recently, you know, gave out, you know, we're constantly giving out the Google Cardboards, and it's available everywhere now for under $25. And people use that and their mobile phones. I believe that mobile is really what's going to drive the, you know, worldwide adoption of VR, because everybody's got it, right? Last year alone, there was like, what, 1.2 billion phones that were shipped out. And, you know, for all the smartphone users, everybody's looking for something more. And so to have the ability, you know, like Nancy just said, to hear what the players are saying while on the field, you know, that's like just a whole new level of intimacy and experience that, you know, people are going to be able to have. So if I can just take my phone, you know, put it in a cardboard and have that experience, or, you know, put it in a Gear VR and have that experience, I think that's what's going to move this along. In terms of creating the content itself, you know, there are a lot of cameras that are coming which will allow users to also create this type of content, right? So we'll have the next YouTube with 360, I think maybe a year from now, maybe even yeah, definitely 12 months from now, a lot of users are going to be in the position to create their own content. With all these cameras that are coming out that are under $300 that allows the user to go out and create 360 content. So, but professionally, now, as Nancy said, there are a lot of very complicated and a lot of very difficult scenarios and situations that require the level of expertise and experience to be able to capture a lot of that with the omnidirectional cameras. There are a lot of things that we're learning now, and we're going to be able to share as we go along. But we're not too far from consumers being able to, to watch VR. I just saw recently, I think there's already been 500,000 Google Cardboards that have been, purchased or shipped out there, and this was, even a couple of months back. So I can imagine we're probably at 1 million now, and it's only going to explode. With every single person that I've shown the content on Gear VR, they go, I have to have this, right? And that whole effect, and so it's going to grow exponentially. It's going to, it's just going to grow exponentially, and there are available resources for consumers.
So this is an open question to the group, and by no means am I making an apples-to-apples comparison, but clearly the three of you are at the forefront of the technology because you're creating it, you're building it, you're bringing it to market. I work in the sports and tech industry, but I have to remind myself we're light years ahead of obviously what the consumer's knowledge is. But speaking of that little company, Google, again, not virtual reality, but Google Glass made a huge wave at first with an augmented experience and having a different lens. But then that came and went because it was really, it wasn't, I think, the user experience that some people expected. It wasn't seamless. It was a little bulkier, so on and so forth. But at least it got it out there. So to that point, for the vast majority of the world that's never touched any type of virtual reality, realistically, are they going to be underwhelmed, overwhelmed? Is it going to be what they expect? I mean, I think there's just a lot of unknowns. I mean, where do you think the technology itself, in terms of what somebody's expectation is and what they walk away with, where does it lie right now?
I don't think people know what they're going to see. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Mary. And I think people are going to be blown away, and they can actually go to Best Buy and look at the NBA content in Milk VR at Best Buy, which is phenomenal. I mean, that's a very accessible place to get in there and see stuff. And I think they're going to be blown away.
I mean, Brendan, you said that when kids touch it, obviously they're super excited. I mean, is that across the board, coaches, everybody?
Yeah, it's game on. As soon as anyone sees something as simple as, I keep showing the virtual reality Google Cardboard Mary alluded to. I have it sitting here. As soon as they see that, our biggest, when we talk to people, and I'm sure Nancy and Mary experienced this. You say virtual reality or interactive 3D, and people go, "Oh, that sounds really cool," and it's like, no, somehow, and the fact that you can go down to Best Buy and experience it, that is the permeation into the mass volume. That's the game changer. It's understanding the experience. Once you experience it, it's kind of, there's no turning back. You're like, that's the best digital experience I could ask for.
Well, I mean, crack.
Oh yeah, I can imagine it's like crack. And I mean, but on that note though, and again, I think virtual reality is so cool because, like you said, it just conjures sci-fi, right? It conjures all kinds of images and things that we don't know about, and excited and expectations. I mean, but so is there going to be a day that comes where we watch an entire NFL game or NBA game through virtual reality? I mean,
oh yeah,
absolutely.
How far away are we? What kind of timeline?
Right, I think it's closer than you think. Actually, I just watched the whole Coldplay on Gear VR. I think a lot of people, their first experience was the Oculus, right? And we all agree that the resolution wasn't where it was, it made people sick and so on, but that's all being improved upon. And then, I was quite disappointed with a lot of what I'd seen on VR before, in terms of the resolution and everything, until I tried the Gear VR. And then I was completely sold. You stop thinking about the technology and you just start focusing on the experience itself. And it is crack because, the minute you take it off, you're like almost having this withdrawal already, like I want to go back. And you're not thinking about a lot of the things that people were worried about early on in terms of, am I going to get sick, this, that. You're really just looking for more content. And I think that the success of VR this time around is all going to, dwell on the content, because the technology is far past anything that has come before, and it's only getting better. Even, the experience on the Google Cardboard is surprisingly, good. So, it's not as convenient because you have to hold it, but it's surprisingly good. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, back to Google for a minute. Google Glass, what I love about Google is that they're engineers, they're technologists. They're experimenting with their very smart, capable teams. And the fact that they bought Viewmaster and they're going to try and do some immersive experiences for kids is probably the way that they're going to implement what they've learned from Google Glass. So I don't think it's gone away. I think it's going to come back bigger and better, in a different way.
Speaking of Google and speaking of Facebook, I mean, obviously those are two companies that everybody knows. Who would you say is in a better position right now, potentially between Google and Facebook? Facebook bought up Oculus Rift, and that was a huge acquisition for them. But Google is made what I believe 9 to 10 acquisitions in the robotics space, and that goes very well with virtual reality. Exactly, AI.
Yeah. Well, I think there are two different experiences at the moment, and I think one of them is very consumer accessible because it's cardboard. So the question is, who's your demo? What's the experience you're trying to provide? What's the quality and resolution today? And Facebook has a huge advantage in its social network and reach, and the fact that it bought Oculus, which is a brand that's recognized with the developing community first. So they've sold 160,000 developing units, and they're projected to have 1 million users on Facebook when the end of the year is through and Oculus is available there. So that's a pretty huge leap of advantage, and Google will find their space just like Sony might with PlayStation and anybody else. So it's a big, wide world where content is king, and I think Mary's right about that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then also the other advantage with Google is the Android platform, right? I think right now about 80+% of all the smartphones that are out there are Android phones. So that's another play as we roll out VR, because Samsung, that's the Android platform. So, I think that there is another play, right, that we might see from Google based on the fact that we're rolling out, so many smartphones, and that's what's going to be driving VR. So it will be interesting to see.
And so we're about out of time, and the thing that kills me is this is an area that we could easily spend hours talking about, just because I think there's so much education. Yeah, so much education needs to be done, but kind of as to finish it off, I know that a lot of teams, specifically in the sports arena, are going to see this and want to know more. So for each of the three, we're going to kind of end it. If people want more information, if they want to work with your teams and your technology, I mean, how should people go about doing that? What's the best way to get a hold of Eon Sports, Next Galaxy, and 2-Bit Circus? So start with you, Nancy.
2bitcircus.com. There's a link to our VR material, and certainly you can find me there, Nancy at 2-Bit Circus. Don't pummel me with too much email, and I'm also on Twitter at itfrom2bit.
Love it.
Love it.
And Mary?
Nextgalaxy.co. So it's nextgalaxy.co, and I'm on Twitter, Mary Spio. I'm also on LinkedIn, Mary Spio as well. Nextgalaxy.co.
Brennan, take us home.
Yeah, eonsportsvr.com, eonsportsvr.com. We're on Twitter as eonsportsvr, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn as well.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I know we had some technical hiccups to get started. We kind of really hit the ground running after that, but we're going to, no question, have to do this again. So thank everybody for your time. And
thank you very much. Nice to meet you, Brendan and Mary, and you too.
Likewise.
Great talk. Thank you.
Take care. See everybody.
All right.